We are probably already live in any second now. I will hear that annoying reverb. It's Monday. It's 3 o'clock. It is July 8th. We already said this last time. I'm just waiting for this thing to go live. I don't know if you're going to be hearing me just babbling here, but on my screen it says setting up your Facebook message and everything else. So, hey, that's what we're doing. How you doing, Peter?
I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic. Like I said, it's Monday. It's coffee with the coaches. One day we're going to figure out this whole intro thing when we go live on Facebook, right? Because I don't want people to think that we're amateurs. You know, this is a very serious and professional podcast, is it not?
Well, I would say our themes and concepts are very professional. Our execution is getting there.
It is getting there. You're right. I mean, so let's be positive. Let's start with positivity. Let's go over kind of our standard intro. I'm Christopher Holmquist. You are Peter Valancourt. We are business owners. We love to talk about business, coach people in their businesses. And last week on our episode, we talked about the Socratic method of questioning, right? And it was a topic that I don't know about you, but I kept on thinking about it after kind of the podcast was over.
That was one of my favorite episodes. I even texted you right after. I was
Yeah.
really charged up by it. I find it to be something that um, it sparks something within us when we're having conversations and we're asking the question. There's something empowering about that. You're guiding the conversation to a certain place, and I was really charged up. I thought it was a great discussion.
I feel like it reminded me that when we're asking great questions, we're building something,
Yes. Yeah, that's a
right?
great way to look at it.
And like you're building that relationship, you're building that connection. And for those that didn't see last week's podcast, because who would? Although they're all recorded and they are on our YouTube channel.
Yes.
So go hit us up there. But and now I don't even know what the hell I was saying. But
You were talking about like crafting a conversation through asking the right questions. It sort of it shows that you really are invested in that conversation and in that relationship.
right. Yeah. And so the Socratic questioning method, right, is this way of having a dialogue between two people that ultimately gets to the truth, right? And that was the point I wanted to recap for people is that this is you and I having a discussion, right? Let's say you're a client, you're sitting down and you want to sell your house, and I'm the listing agent who wants to sell your house. If we can have a dialogue where we can question each other openly and get to the truth of the matter, i.e. price, commission, showing instructions, motivation, whatever it is, well, doesn't that serve us better?
Yes. And it's something you've been talking about a lot lately is what if we just, without fear of consequences or no agenda attached to it, just speak the truth. Just have a completely truthful conversation about something in the with the goal of um, you know, getting to the point together, getting somewhere together that we both can agree on.
And so you couldn't have, queued us up or set me up better for this segue, because my question to you then is, we learned last week that, through this intense question and answering dialogue, we know that questions now are at the heart of our business, right? But what's next? What's after that?
The words we use, Chris, using the right words, saying the right thing. We've both been exposed to a lot of Phil Jones lately. Really, the master of the modern way of exactly what to say. You may have seen his books.
Yep.
He's got sort of a main book, and then he's got some that are crafted towards different industries. Of course, we're in the real estate business. We mentioned this weekly.
Yeah.
We're really in the relationship business. I think you and I.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
and this, even if it was the real estate specific version of his course and class and book, that we're talking about, it doesn't matter, because the words that he uses are universal. I mean, they
yes.
transcend whatever business you're in, right? We'll get
Yep.
into that at a later episode where we talk about those exact words, because you're right. That is the next thing. We know now that we got to ask great questions. But the next logical question to me, as you stated, was, well, then, like, what's the question? Right.
Yeah.
So before we give you that answer, because of course that's what everybody wants, I mean, that's the final piece of it, we need to do some more foundational work. So today we're going to do two things. We're just going to kind of recap those Socratic questions. And you and I perhaps have a little dialogue around that, because I think that they really were so cool. And I want to give people an opportunity to write them down. And of course, we can send anybody all of this material if they want it. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to break down, Phil Jones's 4 cornerstones of conversational excellence, right? So it's like the precursor to what are the words we're going to use. This is setting you up like so that you understand the dynamics of this conversation you're about to have, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely.
All right. I'll give you a little bit of a preview before we jump into the recap of last week with those questions. The 4 cornerstones of the conversational excellence are this. Number 1, think about this. The worst time to think about what you are going to say is when you are saying it.
Oh, gosh.
How many times have we fallen victim to that, right?
Yeah.
Number 2, curiosity is the fuel for great conversations. I think we were just talking about questions, right? Number 3, people do things for their own reasons, not yours.
That's a great one.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh God, we could spend a lot of time on that one because I don't know about you guys and your businesses, but I feel that there's a lot of egos in our business. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
And the sooner we understand that it's not about us and it's about them, the better off you're going to be. Just let's call that a bonus tip for the week. Maybe it's one of those glaringly obvious things, but I think sometimes those glaringly obvious things need to be stated, right? It's not about us.
Right. And I think the sooner we accept that as the sort of North Star of your conversations or consultations, whatever you're doing, the better off you're going to be. It's not
Yep.
about us. Take yourself out of it.
It's kind of like that truism, right? It is you, it's not the market. Or it's not the market, it is you. Either way,
Yes.
it's right. Right?
That's great.
Trust us, it is you. And when I say you, I'm talking about, I point the finger at myself too, right? I mean, I can't blame the market any more than anybody else is allowed to if I say that.
Yeah.
So then people do things for their own reasons, not yours. And the last cornerstone of conversational excellence is the person asking the questions controls the conversation. And that's paramount to all of our businesses. So while it's not about us, we can still control the conversation by asking the right questions.
Right.
Deep.
So deep.
Love
And
it.
you say it's not about us, and it's not, but for you to be effective in helping your counterpart, your client, your whoever, you've got to be able to dial in with the right questions and the right language.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm just bringing up now, that's why I have a blank stare on my face. I'm bringing up the slide about the Socratic questions. And let's share the screen and get into it. So here we are. These are the ones that we talked about last week, Peter, and we're going to kind of start at the top and, move our way around clockwise on this. All right. So clarification questions. So the Socratic questioning, again, takes you through these like 9 different steps where you're just like hammering away at beliefs and assumptions, and you're doing all these different things. This is kind of the 5-step version of a Socratic method conversation involving a lot of questions, right? So, Peter, why don't we just pretend, and again, let's just stick to real estate. You're somebody that's looking to list their home. I'm going to be the listing agent, and we'll kind of just, I'm going to try to get you to give me opportunities to ask some of these questions that are up on the screen. Sound good?
Okay, absolutely.
Cool. All right. So, Peter, thank you so much for your time, sitting down for me. I'd like to get right into the kind of into the questioning here and getting to know you a little bit better. So do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
No, that'd be great.
All right, super. So tell me again, you said that you wanted to sell your house. What exactly does that mean to you? And I know that
Oh,
sounds
well,
like a little bit of a strange question, right? I mean, what exactly you want to sell your house, right? But dive into, a little bit deeper for me as to like, what does that mean for you
oh, sure. Thanks for asking. We'd like to be, really wrapped up and out of here in 6 weeks.
in 6 weeks? Is there any specific, why would you say 6 weeks? I mean, is there something specifically that's happening in 6 weeks?
I have a job I'm starting in Atlanta.
Ah, okay. So I can see obviously the starting, and you need that to coincide with getting rid of the house.
I'd love to be done with this part of the whole process, and just sort of shut my mind off from dealing with this so I can focus.
Right. Okay. I'm going to break script there. I tried to use a few of those clarifying questions, right? I mean, obviously, the more we know, the better we're going to be able to service our folks, right? If I had just said, you want to get your house on the market? Yeah. All right. Well, would you like to sign a listing agreement? Yeah. Okay. And then you sign up the house, and then the first offer comes in, and it's $100,000 over your asking price. But they need a 3-month closing.
Right.
What good is that for Peter, right? I mean, unless I clarify and ask. And again, understand that these are going to be very kind of basic examples, but I hope you can see that you can just apply these to any situation, right? No matter how complex, just keep asking. Why would you say that? What exactly does that mean? Why would you say that? Sounds kind of like one of those harsh questions. Sounds a little abrasive, perhaps, unless you're like us and we try to be truth tellers and we just kind of say things how they are. But you can soften that up, like what would make you say that, Peter, right? Or tell me a little bit more about why you said that.
Okay.
That's how you can kind of soften that. So again, these are not written in stone. You don't have to only ask the questions this way. Do whatever works for you in your business, right?
Right.
Um,
And I think what's so important in this process is to understand that clients, specifically sellers, because there's time is of the essence. There's a time quotient here that's so important. If
right,
they don't feel heard, if our client doesn't feel heard or doesn't feel that we've taken the time to really understand their situation, and we have some moment of friction where they're like, well, I really needed to be out of here in 6 weeks, and we're thinking as the agent, this person offer for 100 grand over asking. Sure,
right,
it's 3 months, but 100 grand, you know, what don't they get? When in fact, it was really incumbent upon us at this consultation process to ask the questions, to take the time, not go right to the agreement, take the time to understand their situation a little bit. Um, and all of this would have been avoided.
right. Why do you think probing assumptions, is such a big part of this? I would say that just for the mere fact that there's so much disinformation in our business out there right now, right? That I think that it's not uncommon that people have all these wild assumptions about what's going on, not only in the market, but with various rules and regulations.
Oh yeah.
Right? What else, I mean, can we talk about in probing assumptions?
Well, I think one of the most important um, results of this process is to find out, is this a need to move or is this a want to move? It's the motivation. And sometimes you're not going to get that in the first question, the second question. You may not unearth that until that third level, fourth level question, but it's
Right.
really vital information for you and I on that end of it to
Well,
ascertain what's going on here.
let's use that example then and look at what else could we assume, right? Perhaps, we have to be careful not to make our own assumptions. And, when Peter said that he has to close in 6 weeks because he's starting a new job, maybe he just assumed that that's the way it had to be done,
Right.
right? That there wasn't a different way, that he couldn't, move out and rent his home out for a little bit to take off the financial pressure so that he could get down there and not have to, see what else, right? I mean, if we just start making these assumptions, we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
So it's great that this is the second, kind of step, if you want to look at it that way, because yeah, fine, ask our clarifying questions, But then the backup is to probe those assumptions and make sure that we're really on the right page, right?
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
where, again, you can do some restating. All right, so if I'm hearing you right, Peter, is it true that you feel that you have to have your house sold in 6 weeks? Or is that just kind of like what you would like to do, right? And that could get you, going down that road. What evidence is there to support that? I think is a great one. Sometimes we're in difficult conversations with people, right?
Yeah.
And they
I
and
love that one.
yeah, and they're making statements that, we know there is contradictory evidence. So we can use something like that question to, turn the conversation around, perhaps in a better direction for us, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, so like we're kind of halfway through, and I don't want to spend all the time on this because it's really a recap from last week, and we're just going a little bit deeper than we did last week on these. But we could do the same thing for each of these, right? We could take that very simple scenario of Peter sitting down and being somebody that wants to sell their house, Krister being the person that's trying to sell their house, and make all of these points around that singular event, right? And I think that you could do the very same thing if Peter had a restaurant and wanted to improve his business,
Yes.
right? Ask clarifying questions of your customers, the patrons who are sitting there eating every day. Ask them what their assumptions are.
Yeah. Think about this as directions to where you want to go. If you just
Right.
jump in the car without driving directions, I know this is a old person, metaphor
Yeah.
now that we have
Yeah.
ways, but
Yeah.
but
Right.
if you don't have your marching orders and you're just springing into action without direction, are you really serving your client? And therefore, are you really serving yourself? Probably not.
The answer is no. And again, time efficiency. If we're not asking enough questions, we're taking roads and we're going down paths that, are costing us time, money, effort, sometimes
Yeah.
business, right? And then we got
Yep.
to backtrack and then we got to go and find the right path. If we had just spent, it's the classic argument I have with agents all the time. Well, people don't want to sit down for a buyer consultation. Well, guess what? Then you just won the right to drive them around willy-nilly for the rest of your life until they decide that the absolute perfect home comes along, right? It's got to
Yep.
stop. I mean, and I'm talking about everybody, right? We have to set limitations, and the business is hard enough without us, making it 10 times harder. You know what? Let's stay on this because I think that I'm getting like kind of excited about this conversation because I think it's again, we'll get to the Phil Jones stuff and maybe it'll be next week, right? We'll just jump into it. How do you feel about that, Peter?
There's so much here
Yeah.
with that of value to talk
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
It's it's
So
really the difference between success and failure. It just doesn't happen right away. Probably it's that delayed gratification. Can you hang on to that concept? Take the time to ask the questions, and then do it right.
yeah, it is the delayed gratification. You're right, because again, that example of the agents, they just feel like if I jump in that car, if I show them that house, that they feel that that is the best chance of getting a paycheck at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We've talked ad nauseum about that, that's the wrong thing to be gunning for, right? That's like saying, I will be happy when I get that or whatever, because it's never going to come. I mean, you have to find it in the path, right?
Yes.
Okay, so questioning viewpoints. What are alternative ways to look at this? Again, probing assumptions, helps you, like I said, you said this perfectly. It helps you give more direction and clear-cut directions on where you're going in this journey, right? And then we can get down to questioning viewpoints, which is just a different way of probing assumptions. This allows us to kind of use that opposite viewpoint, which is, I think, an effective technique again, right? What are alternative ways to look at this, right? So going back to our example, Peter, you said that you're starting your job in 6 weeks. You want everything to be wrapped up in 6 weeks. You know, what if instead of that, we considered putting the house for rent. We look for a short-term rental, get you top dollar because it will be a short-term rental. I'll manage all the details. That will be no problem. You guys can move, and this, that, and the other, right? And so anyway, I build this other alternative for them.
Yeah.
And the great thing is, it doesn't matter if that's the right one or the wrong one. The value is in that I offered Peter an alternative.
Right. And if you think about that exact situation where somebody's got a major life change, which most people do when they come to us, because moving is a um, pretty huge undertaking. We're the ones who are doing this on a regular basis. Most
Yeah.
people do this a handful of times in their life. So we should be able to ask the questions that offer them alternate viewpoints or options. That could really go a long way to taking that relationship to the next level.
Shows value.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Implications and consequences. This is another great one. People need to know what they're getting into. And our job is to paint that picture for them, and so know what the consequences are. And my business partner Kelly, I said it last week, does this beautifully when presenting price. Here you go. Here's kind of like, and this is a different market, it's like, here's the stretch, here's the market value, here's where we drive offers. Right? The consequences of shooting for the moon is that we might find that one person that's willing to overpay for the house. But the consequence is that we could be looking at price reductions, and then we're going to hurt ourselves. And I can give you the evidence for that under probing assumptions, right? And so, yeah, I mean, that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
implications and consequences. Well, how else does that fit into the general business sense?
Well, when you're talking about implications and consequences, I'm thinking of so many buyers right now because I mean, let's face it, we live in this turbulent time where we're in an election year, and it's a very unique election with all the circumstances going on around it. Whatever side of the
Yeah.
political aisle you're on, we've got conflict, we've got movement with mortgage rates kind of hanging in a higher spot than they've been. So we've got all of these things that are occupying buyers' brains, and they're thinking it's probably a good time to just sit on the sideline. And
Yes.
I always
Right.
use the I always use the analogy like, when's the best time to plant? 30 years ago. When's the second best time? Today. And
Right.
I firmly believe, after being around the real estate business for as long as I have, that concept applies to buying real estate too, for the most part. If you're moving in 6 months, probably not.
No, no.
But so I feel like the conversation around consequences of waiting to buy real estate or waiting to invest in something, um, is something that these questions really help the self-discovery process with those buyers. It just opens the door to a different way of thinking about it than the bits and pieces of shock media they're getting from the news,
Yes.
the
Yes.
guy at the barbecue that is an expert.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, that goes along with, our mastery of our data, right? I mean, we've got to know our markets. We've got to know our stuff cold so that we can probe assumptions, so that we can talk about implications and implications and consequences, because we know it, right? We're not guessing at it. We're not just, throwing a dart against the wall. We know what's going to happen, within reason, right?
Yeah.
All right. And then questions about the questions. What's the point of asking that question? Why do you think I asked that question? Why do you think that we did this exercise? Questions about the questions to me is really just kind of cementing something home.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of like that whole, well, here we are in like, so what was the point of asking that question? Well, it was so that we arrived right here.
I think it also uncovers some motivations that the prospective client doesn't understand that we might have. And typically, the people that do this at a high level, their motivation is to help, and not just help get to the finish line, but help in a holistic sense that we're elevating this person's station in life by guiding them through an investment that's going to impact their wealth building and for their life.
Yeah.
If you think of what we do in those terms, it's a pretty massive commitment to somebody's well-being. And I think questions about the questions reveal that in a way that might not be readily apparent to a lot of people.
Yeah. All right. What other ways can we use this information? I was thinking as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, applying this in the general business sense, right? I would say to people, look, you can use this in talking to vendors, right? Um, Building relationships with your vendors. Um, People are in businesses where they have choices of vendors, right? So, I mean, like if you go deep with your vendors, you can find out a lot of stuff and you can build deeper relationships that can have massive payouts, financially for you down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. It can have the financial benefit. It can also go to really nurture your existing relationships. I think all of us have those people in our life who are like, example, but if you know a good barber, if you know you're dying, oh, you gotta go see my guy. He's the
Yeah.
best. And there's a value to connecting people together that should be connected.
Yeah.
Um, and there's like a sort of gratifying feeling that you put two people together in a good way.
Yeah. I was also thinking that within your organization, you can use this in like in tackling projects. Right. So like if you're sitting there around your boardroom and saying like, clients are not buying this, right? You can use this as a template to try to like come up with ways to question or to solve that, right?
Yep. Yeah.
People, all right, start. What's the brainstorming? I think people hate the color. Hey, why would you say that? Well, because nobody has ever liked to buy yellow tube socks. But what exactly does that mean? Well, I don't know. I was just kind of like researching and I saw that, in the history of the world, nobody has ever bought yellow tube socks, right? And then you go through this whole thing, right? And then you start to probe the assumptions. Well, what else can we assume?
Yeah.
Well, nobody likes any bright colored tube socks, it turns out. So crap, now we just uncovered that 2/3 of our product line is barking up the wrong tree, right?
Yeah.
How did we choose those assumptions, right? And you can see how like these sets of questions, you can just go on forever.
They're really incredible because I think assumptions are something that are so prevalent as just part of being a human. Um,
Yeah.
these questions pierce that and really bring it to the forefront. Um,
Yeah, I'm just kind of like freaking out because I'm looking at these questions. I'm like, they apply to literally anything.
yes, I know. It's
Yeah, you know what I mean?
scary.
Like you could take this and go into a personal relationship or a
Yes.
problem or whatever it is. I think it's I don't know, sometimes you just need to spend some time and look at something to understand kind of that it can be, and I love that it's simple.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This is you don't have to be a rocket scientist to say, why would you say that? Or what exactly does that mean? Or how does this relate to what we've been talking about? Right. This is conversational English.
Yeah. I would say you don't have to be a rocket science to ask these questions, but you do have to be disciplined about practicing this before go time, which is a Phil Jones thing we'll get into next week. But
No doubt, no doubt. All right, so let's do the teaser then, because why not? We've got just a couple of minutes here, and then this is really what we're going to be looking at, right? I want people to hear these four things that I'm going to say here. These are the four cornerstones of four cornerstones of conversational excellence. Try saying that 5 times in a row. Number one, the worst time to think about what you're saying is when you're saying it, right? I read these at the beginning, but think about these. We're going to take you down the three areas: critical conversations, common objections, and then later on today, we'll get to what that means. We'll take you through these exercises of, coming up with the the game plan and the framework for your conversations. Curiosity is the fuel for great conversations, right? Ironically, if you show up to a conversation with certainty about the actions required, you typically create increased uncertainty in the other person. Go back to what we just said before. It's about them, not about you, right? If I come marching into that conversation, like, I know exactly where this is going and whatever else, Peter's going to start to pick up on that body language and he's going to be like, thanks, but I want somebody that's going to listen to me, right?
Yep.
So we'll talk to you about that. People do things for their own reasons, not yours, right? This is exactly what we just said. And then finally, the person asking the question controls the conversation, right? And I love this. Questions lead to conversations, lead to relationships, lead to opportunities, and lead to actions.
So great.
Look how many steps there are before we get into action, Peter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Dude, that's it. So
Yeah.
now, of course,
So
we have
great.
time. But that's what we'll do. We'll jump into it. Episode 18 next week is going to be about those 4 cornerstones. We're going to dive into that exercise of, getting clear about what that looks like, and then figure out what the magic words are after that.
Sounds like a plan.
Awesome. Always great to see you. And we'll
Yeah.
see you.
Great conversation. Thanks,
Thanks, man.
Chris.
Bye.
See ya.